Wow, has Saoirse Ronan come such a long way as an actress in her own right. Film Buff 06 here, coming your way with my review of the 2015 romantic period coming of age drama film Brooklyn, which premiered to critical acclaim and a standing ovation at that year's Sundance Film Festival, had a very limited release in both the US and here in the UK, was essentially the underdog of that year's awards season, with only 3 Academy Award nominations, namely for Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actress in a Leading Role, and Best Picture, and a BAFTA Award for Outstanding British Film, was ranked number 48 on the BBC's Greatest 100 Films of the 21st Century, was distributed by the likes of BBC Films, Lionsgate and Fox Searchlight Pictures after a hard-fought bidding war with Focus Features and the Weinstein Company for a record deal of $9 million, was shot in 8 weeks and edited in another 15 weeks, was adapted from the best-selling 2009 Combe Toybin novel of the same name by Nick Hornby, was directed by John Crowley, who previously directed Boy A with Andrew Garfield, and Is Anybody There with Sir Michael Caine, as well as a couple of episodes of True Detective. Stars Saoirse Ronan, Emory Cohen, Domhnall Gleeson, Jim Broadbent and Dame Julie Walters. Takes place in the early 1950s and tells the story of a young Irish woman named Ailish Lacey, who is arranged by her elder sister Rose and a kindly local priest named Father Flood to emigrate from her rural hometown in Enniscorthy to Brooklyn in New York, where she eventually lands herself her first job in a department store and falls in love with and eventually secretly marries a local young Italian-American plumbing apprentice named Tony. But when she receives the devastating news that Rose has passed away in unexpected circumstances, she decides to return to her rural hometown, and it's while back there that she finds herself in a bit of an emotional crossroads and having to make a crucial, life-changing decision about whether she wants to stay in her ancestral Irish hometown or return to her new home in America. So, what are my thoughts on Brooklyn? Do I feel that this film really deserved its Best Picture nomination way back a couple of years ago? Abso-fucking-lutely. While it may be as close to perfect as it can be, in my honest opinion, and while I do find it a bit strange that it seems to have quietly flown under the radar within the last couple of years, largely due to it being completely snubbed at the Oscars, I still freaking adore this film and can perfectly see why it's earned a near perfect 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, why it has been getting the near universal praise that it truly deserves, and why pretty much everyone has fallen in love with it to the point where it has been very highly regarded and hailed as one of the very best films to ever come out in 2015, especially when you take into consideration the fact, not opinion, but rock solid fact, that 2015 was just such a fantastic year for film, and easily one of the best we've ever had so far this century, since 2008. In fact, the only perfect way for me to describe Brooklyn is that it is not just a major fuck you to easily the worst romantic movie trilogy of all time, i.e. the beyond god-awful 50 Shades trilogy, not just even more of a major fuck you to the incendiary and divisive rantings, ravings, and or beyond insane policies on Twitter or otherwise of a certain current president of the United States, who in my opinion looks more like a morbidly obese, blonde-haired, orange-skinned baboon than he is a serious leader of the free world, which I'm briefly going to get into in a bit. But likewise with what La La Land did for Hollywood musicals last year, it feels like an old-fashioned throwback / love letter to old-style classic Hollywood movies such as Singing in the Rain and The Quiet Man with John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, both of which, by the way, are referenced in this movie. While I can sort of see where some of the minor criticisms about the story to this movie being on the surface a bit bland, predictable by nature, basic, ordinary, small-scale, conventional, and unremarkable are coming from, it still didn't really matter to me all that much because of how remarkably well executed it was. Plus, I liked the fact that it had the balls to touch on dark topical themes of immigration, you know, what it feels like to be an immigrant, and how do you try to integrate yourself into a culture that is entirely alien to the one you know back at home, that are rather unfortunately and painfully relevant today when you think about it, especially since we're currently living in an age where such a hotly debated / divisive topic like immigration has become a huge hot potato within the political landscape and has given extreme right-wing / conservative politicians and news outlets a rare sort of Trumpian opportunity to effectively mimic what Hitler and the Nazis did to the Jews during the late 30s and early 40s, and blatantly demonize a particular group of people and make them out to represent everything that's fundamentally wrong with modern Western society. Out of the 3 Nick Hornby films I have had the privilege to review so far on this channel, namely this and Education and About a Boy, I am of the opinion that this has to be by far the most unexpectedly and brilliantly humorous screenplay that the guy has ever produced to date. And I am dead serious. He just did such an amazing job adapting this book that I wasn't initially too familiar with. John Crowley's direction of this movie is nothing short of fantastic. And I really love the little visual movements and colour palette changes he does with the camera to dramatically emphasise and enhance Ailish's character development throughout the film. Speaking of which, the cinematography and the editing are easily some of the best I've ever seen in a mainstream film of this genre, and just makes this film absolutely gorgeous to look at. Michael Brooks' score to this movie is just beautiful and just has this sort of naturally warm, earthy, melodic and ethereal Irish lilt to it that makes it all the more lovely to listen to. The set design, the hairstyling and the costumes all look outstanding and really make you feel like you have taken a TARDIS and travelled back in time to both Ireland and New York in the early 1950s. is. The acting from everyone involved is just fan-freaking-tastic across the board. Emory Cohen, I can agree, may indeed look a bit like a young Marlon Brando from either The Wild One, A Streetcar Named Desire, or even On the Waterfront in this movie. But regardless, I still thought he did a decent, sweet and likeable enough job as Tony without coming across as a bit too dull or bland or uninteresting. Plus, you can't help but completely buy the chemistry between him and Saoirse Ronan in this movie, which is just so sweet, charming, and wholly believable to watch on screen. The Irish actress who plays Miss Kelly may only have a very brief, sort of bookending appearance in this movie, but she is nonetheless suitably bitchy in the role, and also serves as the perfect catalyst as to what ultimately motivates Eilish to want to leave her dreary, bleak and hopeless existence in Ireland behind and make a better life for herself in the new world. Jim Broadbent as Father Flood is delightfully charming as always and effortlessly manages to pull off a great Irish accent. Dame Julie Walters as the strict and overly religious Irish landlady, Miss Kehoe, is just brilliantly hysterical and hilarious every time she's on screen, and each and every one of her snarky and well-timed remarks makes you cry so much with laughter that she makes J. Jonah Jameson himself sound a bit tame in comparison. Domhnall Gleeson, who by the way was on such a fantastic role in 2015 with his roles in this, Ex Machina, and especially as General Hux in Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens, was also great as Eilish's old acquaintance Jim Farrell, even though we don't really get to see his character until the last third of the movie, when Eilish eventually returns to Ireland. And even though he is merely used as a plot device, not just to nicely contrast with Tony, whilst at the same time making him likeable and relatable, and thus not making him come across as a bit of a dick like Cal Hockley from Titanic, or even Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, but also to try and kindly tempt Eilish with the prospect of a better life if she stays in Ireland, so that she doesn't have to make the crucial decision of going back to America to be with Tony. But by far the best performance of the bunch, and the one who not only gives one of the best performances of her entire career so far in this movie, not only gives one of the best female performances I have ever seen, not only rightfully deserved her Oscar nomination for Best Actress that year, not only probably should have easily won the Oscar if it weren't for Brie Larson's performance in Room, which I have yet to check out, by the way, not only would have made me completely lose interest in seeing this film if she wasn't in it, but also completely owns every single freaking frame of this entire movie from beginning to end, is of course Saoirse Ronan herself as Eilish. I mean, oh my god, has Saoirse Ronan come such an extraordinarily long way as an actress in her own right for over the last decade. Hell, even ever since she received that first Oscar nomination, aged 13, for her role as young Bryony Tallis in Atonement, and her performance being one of the couple of highlights, other than Stanley Tucci, of the otherwise disappointing 2009 Peter Jackson adaptation of The Lovely Bones. She has continued to prove to us, and actually probably will continue to prove to us in the foreseeable future, how far she's truly come in her career, and how much of a consistently fantastic actress she has grown up to be, and where she particularly shines the most are in the moments where she uses her piercing blue eyes and facial expressions to brilliantly convey / express to us the entire gamut of emotions that her character goes through throughout the film. Speaking of which, Eilish's character transformation throughout the film, from being sweet, adorable, and innocent, but shy, inexperienced, and extremely vulnerable, to much stronger, worldly, braver, and more confident and independent, is compellingly and beautifully well told. If I said that the third act, when Eilish decides to return back to Ireland for a week to belatedly say her goodbyes to Rose after not being able to make it to the funeral because of the boat journey, didn't suffer from any slight pacing issues that slightly bothered me about it, then I would be lying. Now, don't get me wrong, I would understandably give the film credit if it was deliberately paced that way to effectively raise the stakes of Eilish having to make this crucial life-changing decision about whether she wants to remain in her ancestral Irish hometown or return to her new home in New York in a way that thankfully doesn't make it come across as too emotionally manipulative to its core audience. And the pacing of the first and second acts were great. But I just wish the pacing towards the end could have been a bit more tightened, because it started to feel not necessarily boring, but rather heavy after a while. Seemed to last longer than 2 hours and almost left me wondering when the ending was ever going to come round. In conclusion, despite my reservations on the third act suffering from slight pacing issues, everything else about this movie just works so remarkably well. From the fantastic direction by John Crowley to the indelibly memorable characters, especially Eilish, to the excellently humorous writing by Nick Hornby, to the beautiful soundtrack by Michael Brook, to the surprisingly relevant and timely coming-of-age story about immigration and figuring out where you truly belong in the world, that relates to pretty much everyone, to the exquisite set and costume designs, to the breathtaking cinematography, to the beyond flawless performances from everyone involved, and especially a career-defining performance from Saoirse Ronan. I highly recommend that you go and check this movie out if you're a fan of similar classic films of this genre to this, such as Gone with the Wind, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill, or Casablanca, or if you're someone who's just become a fan of Saoirse Ronan's work thanks to this movie. I honestly cannot agree more with everybody else that Brooklyn is a freaking classic that will make you laugh and cry all at the same time, will make you really think twice about bitching and moaning that Hollywood nowadays don't really make films like they used to, and thus about losing faith in good filmmaking, deserves a lot more attention than it's been given within the last couple of years, and is easily one of the best films of 2015. And with all that being said, My overall rating for Brooklyn is a freaking solid 9 out of 10. Now, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below and let me know your individual thoughts on Brooklyn, as well as let me know what your favourite Saoirse Ronan film is. Plus, feel free to subscribe to my channel as always, as well as go to my channel page and click on the little bell so that you get all of the notifications and updates from my channel via email. And also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to join my Facebook group page, as well as follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And until my next video, which is going to be a relatively brief review for the most recent 20-minute long live-action short film that made international headlines early last month by taking home the gold at this year's Oscars for one truly special reason: The Silent Child. Do take care, everyone, and goodbye.